It was one of those evenings when the world felt particularly heavy. He sat alone in his small apartment, the kind of place that once felt cozy but now just felt empty. 3 months had passed since the breakup, and honestly, he wasn't doing great. Everyone kept telling him that time heals everything, but they forgot to mention how slowly that clock moves when you're the one waiting. His life had become a predictable loop. Wake up, roll out of bed, make coffee, sit at his laptop for work, order food, watch something mindless on TV, and sleep. Repeat. He'd stopped accepting invitations from friends because explaining how he felt seemed more exhausting than just staying home. His apartment had become his entire world, a safe bubble where nobody could ask those painful questions like, "How are you holding up?" Or worse, "Have you started dating again?" The rain started around 7 that evening. Not the gentle romantic kind you see in movies, but the aggressive type that sounds angry against the windows. He'd just finished reheating leftover pizza when he heard it. A knock, soft, almost hesitant, like whoever was on the other side wasn't sure they should be there. He wasn't expecting anyone. Actually, he couldn't remember the last time someone had knocked on his door unannounced. For a second, he considered pretending he wasn't home, but curiosity got the better of him, and he walked to the door, checking through the peephole. What he saw made his heart skip. Standing in the dimly lit hallway was someone he recognized immediately, but never expected to see here. It was his ex-girlfriend's younger sister. They'd met countless times at family dinners, birthday parties, and holiday gatherings. She was the quiet one, always with a book in hand, the type who observed more than she spoke. They'd had some good conversations over the years, mostly about music and random philosophical questions that pop up after a few drinks at family events. But after the breakup, all contact had stopped. It made sense. When a relationship ends, you don't just lose your partner. You lose their entire circle. Their family becomes strangers again, friends drift away, and suddenly you're left wondering if those connections were ever really yours to begin with. He opened the door slowly, and the sight before him told a story before she said a single word. Her hair was wet, clinging to her face. Her eyes were red, not from crying exactly, but from that exhausted sadness that comes after you've cried all the tears you had, and now you're just running on empty. She held a small bag, the kind you grab in a hurry when you're not planning, just escaping. "I'm really sorry for showing up like this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know where else to go." He stood there for a moment, processing. 100 questions ran through his mind, but the look on her face told him she needed shelter first and explanations could wait. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. "You're soaking wet." She walked in carefully, as if afraid she might break something just by being there. He grabbed a towel from the bathroom and handed it to her. "I'll make some tea," he offered, because that's what people do in moments like these when they don't know what else to say. While the kettle boiled, she dried her hair and sat on the edge of his couch, still holding her bag like she might need to run again at any moment. He brought 2 cups of tea and sat in the chair across from her, giving her space. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable exactly, just heavy with unspoken things. "You must be wondering what I'm doing here," she finally said, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "You don't have to explain if you're not ready," he replied, though he was definitely curious, but she wanted to talk. Maybe she needed to. The words came out slowly at first, then faster, like a dam breaking. She told him about her relationship, about how she'd been engaged to someone she thought she knew. How slowly, so slowly she almost didn't notice, things had changed. Her partner had become controlling, checking her phone, asking where she was every hour, questioning her friendships. She'd convinced herself it was love, that he just cared too much. Then tonight she'd discovered something that shattered that illusion. He'd installed tracking software on her phone, not just location tracking, but everything. Her messages, her emails, her searches. Every private thought she'd ever typed had been watched. When she confronted him, he didn't apologize. He said he had every right to know what his future wife was doing. That's when she packed a bag and left. She was supposed to go to her sister's house, his ex's place. But the thought of facing her right now, explaining everything, dealing with the "I told you so" or the worried looks, felt impossible. She remembered him instead. Remembered how he never judged, how he actually listened during those family gatherings when everyone else was just waiting for their turn to talk. "I know this is weird," she said, looking at him directly for the first time. "You and my sister, everything that happened. I shouldn't have come here." But you were the only person I could think of who might just let me exist without needing to fix me immediately. He understood that feeling more than she knew. You can stay in the guest room, he said simply. No pressure, no questions you don't want to answer. Stay as long as you need. The relief on her face was visible. They talked until 2 in the morning, not about anything heavy, just talking. She asked about his work. He asked about the book she'd been carrying in her bag. They laughed about a disastrous Thanksgiving dinner they both remembered, when someone's uncle had argued about politics until the turkey got cold. Nothing happened that night. There was no moment, no sudden realization, no dramatic shift. Just two people who'd both been hurt, sitting in a small apartment while rain poured outside, finding unexpected comfort in each other's company. When she finally went to the guest room, he sat alone in his living room for a while longer. His apartment felt different somehow, less like a prison and more like a place where life still happened. He didn't know it then, couldn't have predicted it, but that quiet knock on his door had started something that would change everything. She'd come into his room quietly that rainy night, just looking for shelter from a storm. But she'd left something behind in those few hours, something he'd only later understand. She'd reminded him that connection was still possible, that walls built to keep out pain also keep out everything else. As he finally headed to bed, he realized he hadn't thought about his ex-girlfriend once all evening. For 3 months, she'd occupied every corner of his mind, but tonight, for just a few hours, he'd been present in a conversation, genuinely interested in someone else's story, feeling something other than his own pain. It was just one night, just a conversation. But sometimes that's all it takes for the volume in your head to change, for the static to become something else entirely, something louder, something that refuses to be ignored. One night turned into 2, then 3. Then somehow a whole week had passed. She'd wake up early, always careful not to make too much noise. He'd hear her moving around in the guest room, the soft sounds of someone trying to be invisible in a space that wasn't theirs. By the time he got up for coffee, she'd already be dressed, sitting at the small kitchen table with her laptop open, searching for apartments. That first morning after she arrived, there was an awkwardness between them. The kind you feel when you're not sure what the rules are. Should they talk about what happened? Should they pretend everything was normal? Should he ask when she was leaving, or would that sound rude? But coffee has a way of breaking down walls. He made a pot, poured 2 cups without asking, and slid one across the table to her. She looked up, smiled slightly, and said, "Thank you." Just those 2 words, but they relaxed something in the air. "I'm looking at a few places today," she said, scrolling through rental listings. "I should be out of your hair soon." "There's no rush," he replied, and he meant it. The truth was, having someone else in the apartment felt strange but not bad. For 3 months, he'd gotten used to silence. Now there were sounds of life again, the shower running in the morning, the click of a laptop keyboard, someone else's breathing in the space besides his own. They fell into a routine without planning it. Mornings were for coffee and quiet company. During the day, they'd both work, him at his desk in the living room, her at the kitchen table. They'd make lunch separately, occasionally offering the other half a sandwich or some fruit. "You want some?" became their most common phrase. Evenings, though. Evenings became something different. It started on the 3rd night when she offered to cook dinner. "I feel bad just staying here without contributing anything," she explained. He tried to argue, but she insisted. She made pasta, nothing fancy, just simple food. But they ate together at the table instead of him eating alone on the couch like he'd been doing for months. They talked while they ate, small things at first. She mentioned a funny video she'd seen. He told her about a weird email from a client. But gradually, the conversations went deeper. She talked about her relationship, how she'd missed all the warning signs because she wanted so badly to believe in the fairy tale. He found himself opening up about his breakup, saying things he hadn't even told his closest friends. The worst part, he admitted one evening, wasn't the breakup itself. It was realizing I'd stopped being myself somewhere along the way. I'd molded into whatever version of me made the relationship easier. When it ended, I didn't even know who I was anymore. She nodded slowly, understanding in her eyes. I did the same thing. I thought compromise meant disappearing. Like love required me to become smaller so someone else could feel bigger. Those conversations, they were different from any he'd had in years. There was no performing, no trying to say the right thing or be the right person. They were just two people who'd both been broken, comparing notes on how the pieces fell. By the fifth day, something had shifted between them, though neither acknowledged it out loud. He started noticing small things, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, how she hummed quietly while cooking, the fact that she actually laughed at his terrible jokes, real laughs, not polite ones. And he noticed how he felt around her. Lighter somehow, like the weight he'd been carrying had gotten just a bit easier to hold. On the fifth night, they decided to watch a movie. Nothing planned. She just asked if he wanted to, and he said yes. They sat on his old couch, the kind that had seen better days, with a comfortable distance between them at first. The movie was one of those classic films he'd seen a dozen times, but she'd never watched. Halfway through, she started asking questions about the plot. He paused it, explained, and suddenly they were debating the characters' motivations. The movie became background noise to their conversation. At some point, she yawned and leaned her head back against the couch. Then, so naturally it seemed unplanned, her head tilted and rested on his shoulder. He froze. His whole body went rigid. His mind started racing with thoughts he didn't want to have. This was his ex-girlfriend's sister. This was wrong. This was complicated. This was a mess waiting to happen. But also, it felt right. Her presence there, the weight of her head on his shoulder, the easy way she trusted him in that small gesture. It felt like something he'd been missing without knowing it. He sat perfectly still, afraid that moving might shatter the moment or give away what he was feeling. His heart pounded so loud he worried she might hear it. An hour passed. The movie ended. She was asleep, breathing soft and steady. He didn't move. He sat there, uncomfortable and confused and somehow more content than he'd been in months. When she finally stirred awake, she lifted her head slowly, blinked a few times, and looked at him. "Sorry," she mumbled, still half asleep. "I didn't mean to fall asleep on you." "It's okay," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "No problem." She smiled, said goodnight, and went to her room. He stayed on the couch for another hour, staring at nothing, trying to understand what was happening. The next morning, neither of them mentioned it. They had coffee like usual. She searched for apartments like usual. They worked in separate spaces like usual. But there was an energy between them now, something unspoken that made the air feel charged. By day 7, she announced she'd found a place, a small studio apartment across town. She could move in 3 days. The landlord just needed to process her application. "That's great," he said, and he meant it. She needed her own space, her own life. This was always temporary, but when she went to her room that evening, he realized his apartment was going to feel very empty again soon. He'd gotten used to the sounds of someone else being there, the routine they'd created, the conversations over dinner. He'd gotten used to her. That night, lying in bed, he admitted something to himself he'd been avoiding all week. He didn't want her to leave. Not because she needed help, but because somewhere between the pasta dinners and the late-night conversations, in that moment on the couch, something had changed. She wasn't just his ex-girlfriend's sister anymore. She wasn't just a guest. She'd become something more, something he couldn't quite name but couldn't ignore either, and that terrified him. Because feeling something for her meant complications he couldn't imagine. It meant potential hurt for people he'd cared about. It meant entering territory that had no map and no guaranteed safe passage. But feelings don't ask permission. They don't wait for the right time or the perfect circumstances. They just arrive, quietly, settle in and refuse to leave no matter how much you wish they would. She came into his life quietly, just looking for a temporary place to stay. But she was leaving something behind that was anything but temporary. She was leaving noise in his mind, questions in his heart, and the beginning of something that would either be beautiful or disastrous. He just didn't know which yet. Her last night in his apartment arrived faster than either of them expected. She'd packed most of her things throughout the day, her small bag now fuller than when she'd arrived. The guest room looked empty again, just a bed and bare walls, no trace that someone had lived there for 2 weeks. Tomorrow morning she'd move into her new place. Life would go back to normal. They'd probably text occasionally, maybe meet for coffee once in a while, and eventually drift apart like people do. That's what made sense. That's what should happen. But neither of them wanted it to. He'd picked up a bottle of wine on his way back from a grocery run. Nothing expensive, just something to mark the occasion. Thought we could have a proper goodbye dinner, he said, holding it up when he got home. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. That sounds nice. They cooked together this time, moving around the small kitchen in a dance they'd perfected over 2 weeks. She chopped vegetables while he handled the stove. They didn't need to communicate much anymore, just small gestures and understanding. Hand me that. Here. Thanks. Dinner was good, but both of them were quieter than usual. The conversation felt forced, like they were both avoiding saying what they were actually thinking. They talked about her new apartment, about his upcoming work project, about the weather forecast. Safe topics, easy topics, meaningless topics. The wine helped loosen things up. 1 glass became 2, then 3. They moved from the table to the couch, that same spot where she'd fallen asleep on his shoulder days before. The conversation got deeper, more honest, the way it does when alcohol lowers the walls we build around difficult truths. "Can I tell you something?" she asked suddenly, staring at her wine glass instead of at him. "Of course," he said, though something in her tone made him nervous. She was quiet for a long moment, gathering courage. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I always liked you, even before when you were with my sister. I know that's awful to say, I know it makes me sound terrible." He felt his heart stop. Of all the things he'd expected her to say, this wasn't it. She continued, words tumbling out now like she couldn't stop them. "I used to show up at family gatherings hoping you'd be there. I'd plan what to say to you, what books to mention, because I knew we liked the same authors. When you two broke up, there was this tiny, horrible part of me that felt relieved. And I hate myself for that. I hate that I couldn't just be a supportive sister. I hate that I wondered what if." She finally looked at him, and her eyes were wet with tears she was fighting to hold back. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that, especially not tonight. I just needed you to know before I left. I needed to be honest for once instead of hiding everything." He sat frozen, trying to process what he'd just heard. She'd liked him. All this time, during those family dinners and holiday parties and random conversations, she'd felt something he'd never known, never even suspected. "Say something," she whispered. "Please." "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "I never knew. I always thought you just saw me as your sister's boyfriend, someone you were polite to because you had to be. I was good at hiding it," she said with a sad laugh. "I had years of practice." He should have felt uncomfortable. This was complicated, messy, the kind of situation people write warning stories about. But instead, he felt something else. Relief, maybe. Or recognition. Like a piece of a puzzle he didn't know was missing had suddenly clicked into place. "These past 2 weeks," he started carefully, choosing his words like he was walking through a minefield. "They've meant something to me, more than they probably should have. You weren't just a guest. You became someone I looked forward to seeing every morning. Someone who made this apartment feel less empty." She looked at him, hope and fear mixed in her expression. "But I don't know if what we're feeling is real," he continued, "or if we're just two broken people finding comfort in each other because we're both hurting. How do we know this isn't just timing, just convenience?" "We don't," she said simply. "That's the scary part. We can't know for sure." They sat in silence, both thinking about the impossibility of their situation. If they pursued this, the fallout would be massive. His ex-girlfriend, her sister, would be devastated, furious. She'd see it as betrayal from both of them. Her family would take sides. His friends would judge. People would say they'd been having something going on even before, that the breakup happened because of her. Everyone will hate us, she said, voicing what he was thinking. My sister will never forgive me. My parents will be disappointed. Your friends will think you traded up within the same family. I know, he said. It would be so much easier to just walk away tomorrow. Keep this as a nice memory. 2 weeks when we helped each other heal and then we move on with our lives. I know, he said again. So why does that feel wrong? She asked, finally looking directly at him. He met her eyes, and in that moment, he knew his answer. Because some things are worth fighting for even when everyone says you shouldn't, even when it's complicated and messy and might blow up in your face. Is this one of those things? She asked. I think it might be, he said. But I'm terrified I'm wrong. Terrified that 6 months from now we'll realize we made a huge mistake, that we destroyed relationships and hurt people for something that wasn't even real. She nodded. I'm terrified too. I'm terrified of losing my family, of you waking up one day and regretting everything, of people always seeing us as the couple who got together in the worst possible way. They talked through the night, going in circles. Every reason to walk away felt logical and smart. Every reason to try felt emotional and risky. They debated, like their lives depended on the decision because in a way they did. As the first light of dawn started creeping through the windows, they were no closer to an answer. They'd talked themselves hoarse, gone through every possible angle, imagined every scenario. I don't want to lose you, she finally said, exhausted, but I don't want to hurt everyone else either. So what do we do? He asked. She took a deep breath. We try, carefully, we don't rush. I move into my apartment, get my life stable again. You keep healing from your breakup. We give ourselves time to be sure this is real and not just two people clinging to each other because we're both drowning. And then? He asked. And then, if in a few months we still feel this way, if this connection is still here when we're both standing on solid ground again, we'll know it's worth fighting for. We'll face whatever comes together. It wasn't a perfect plan. It wasn't even a great plan, but it was something. A middle path between walking away and diving in recklessly. As the sun rose fully, she gathered her last few things. He helped her carry her bag to her car. They stood in the parking lot, both aware that everything was different now. The confession had changed things. There was no going back to pretending they were just friendly acquaintances. Thank you, she said. For everything. For letting me stay. For listening. For being honest. Thank you for trusting me, he replied. They hugged, and it lasted longer than a friendly hug should. When they pulled apart, both of them knew this wasn't goodbye. It was something else. A pause, maybe. A breath before the next chapter. She drove away and he stood there watching until her car disappeared around the corner. His apartment would be empty again, silent again. But this time it felt different. This time the silence held possibility instead of loneliness. She'd come into his room quietly, stayed for 2 weeks, and left his mind louder than ever. Now, he just had to figure out if that noise was the beginning of something beautiful or a warning he should have listened to. 6 weeks passed before they made it official. 6 weeks of careful distance mixed with constant texting. She'd send him photos of her new apartment setup. He'd share funny work stories. They met for coffee 3 times, always in public places, always keeping it casual and appropriate. Testing whether what they felt survived outside the bubble of his apartment. It did. If anything, the feelings got stronger. On their 4th coffee meeting, she reached across the table and held his hand. Just like that. No announcement, no big moment. Her hand in his, and suddenly everything was different. They were different. I'm sure, she said, reading his questioning look. Are you? He squeezed her hand. I'm sure. They decided to wait a bit longer before telling anyone. She needed to talk to her sister first. He wanted to prepare his friends. They wanted to build something real before subjecting it to the storm they knew was coming. But secrets don't keep well, especially in families. 2 months in, her sister saw them together at a restaurant. She'd been there with friends and they didn't notice her until it was too late. The look on her face when she realized what she was seeing. It was like watching someone's heart break in real time. The phone call came that night. He heard her side of the conversation from across her apartment. Her sister was screaming loud enough that he could make out words. Betrayal. Liar, how could you? You were supposed to be my sister. When she hung up, she was crying. Not the quiet kind of crying, but the gut-wrenching sobs of someone who just lost something they could never get back. She hates me, she said through tears. She said she never wants to see me again. She said I ruined everything. He held her, feeling helpless. This was what they'd known would happen, but knowing doesn't make it hurt less. The next few weeks were brutal. Her sister told their parents. Her mother stopped calling. Her father sent one text, very disappointed in your choices. That was it. 3 decades of being someone's daughter reduced to 7 words of disappointment. His friends weren't much better. Some supported him, said they could see he was happy, and that's what mattered. But others pulled away. One of his oldest friends told him straight, "This is weird, man. You dated one sister and now you're with the other? That's not cool." Social media became a minefield. They kept their relationship offline, but people talked anyway. Mutual friends posted vague things that were clearly about them. Some people have no loyalty. Family means nothing to some folks. They both stopped checking their feeds. The judgment was everywhere. At the grocery store, they ran into her sister's best friend. The woman looked at them like they were criminals, whispered something to her companion, and walked away. Small interactions like that, they added up. Each one was a tiny knife cut, and together they bled you dry. They fought. Of course they fought. All that external pressure had to go somewhere. 3 months in, they had their first big argument. She'd been invited to a family dinner, her cousin's birthday. Her sister would be there. She wasn't sure if she should go. "You should go," he said. "It's your family. Easy for you to say. You won't be there getting stared at like you're the villain. So what, you just never see your family again? That's not sustainable." "Don't tell me what's sustainable. You're not the one who lost everything." The words hung in the air like smoke. She regretted them immediately. He could see it on her face, but they couldn't be taken back. "I lost things too," he said quietly. "Friends, respect, my reputation. But I chose this anyway because I chose you. I didn't ask you to lose anything for me." She shot back, defensive. "That's not how this works. We chose each other. Together. You don't get to throw that in my face when things get hard." She left his apartment that night. They didn't speak for 2 days. When they finally talked, both apologized. But something had cracked just slightly. They'd glimpsed how this pressure could break them if they let it. 4 months in, they hit rock bottom. Her father reached out, said he wanted to talk. She met him at a coffee shop, hopeful that maybe time had softened things. It hadn't. "If you marry this man," her father said, "don't expect me to be there. I won't watch you disrespect your sister like that." She came home shattered. That night, sitting in his car outside a closed diner because she couldn't stand being in either of their apartments, they had to face the real question. "Is this worth it?" she asked, staring out at the empty parking lot. "Are we worth losing everyone else?" He didn't answer right away. He couldn't. Because the honest truth was he didn't know. He loved her, or he thought he did. But love at the cost of everything else? Was any relationship worth that price? "I don't know," he finally admitted. "Some days I think yes, absolutely. Other days I wonder if we're being selfish. If we're hurting people just because we don't want to let go." "My dad won't walk me down the aisle," she said, her voice breaking. "If we get married someday, he won't be there. How do I live with that?" "Maybe he'll change his mind," he offered weakly. "Will he?" she asked. "Will any of them? Or will we be the couple everyone whispers about? The scandal that never quite faded?" They sat in silence, both wrestling with the same question. They'd thought choosing each other would be the hard part. They'd thought if they just loved each other enough, everything else would work out. But love doesn't fix everything. Sometimes love just means carrying more weight. "I need you to be honest with me," she said. "Do you regret this, us?" He thought about it. Really thought about it. The past 4 months had been some of the hardest of his life. But they'd also been some of the best. Despite everything, he'd laughed more, felt more, lived more. "No," he said finally. "I don't regret us. I regret that it's hard. I regret that people got hurt. But I don't regret you." She turned to look at him, tears streaming down her face. "I don't regret you either. Even with all of this. Even losing people I love. I don't regret choosing you. So what do we do? He asked. We keep going, she said. But we do it differently. We stop trying to prove ourselves to everyone. We stop fighting against their opinions. We just focus on us. Build something real, something strong enough to weather all of this. And if they never come around, he asked. Then they don't, she said. And that will hurt. Maybe forever. But I'd rather have you and the pain than not have you at all. They drove home in silence, hands clasped together in the space between their seats. The road ahead was still dark, still uncertain. They'd lost people they loved. They'd face more judgment, more complications, more hard conversations, but they'd also found something rare. Something worth fighting for. They just had to hope it was strong enough to survive the fight. Something shifted around the 6-month mark. Not dramatically, not with any big revelation or fixed relationship. It was quieter than that. Subtle. They just stopped caring as much what everyone else thought. It wasn't that they became cold or uncaring. They still felt the sting of disapproval, still missed the people who'd walked away. But they stopped letting those feelings dictate their daily lives. They stopped trying to justify themselves to people who'd already made up their minds. They focused inward instead. On building something solid between them. On really learning each other beyond the crisis that had brought them together. He learned that she sang in the shower, terribly off-key but with complete confidence. That she cried at animal rescue videos but stayed stone-faced during horror movies. That she needed exactly 20 minutes of silence after waking up before she could handle conversation. That she reorganized his kitchen cabinets when she was stressed, claiming nothing was in logical order. She learned that he talked to himself while working, full conversations with nobody. That he couldn't sleep unless the bedroom was completely dark, not even a sliver of light from under the door. That he saved every ticket stub from movies and concerts, stuffed in a drawer like artifacts from a life he was afraid to forget. That he made the same 3 meals on rotation and acted like he was a chef each time. They learned each other's damage too. The ways their past relationships had wounded them. He tended to shut down during arguments, going silent and distant because that's what had kept the peace before. She apologized for things that weren't her fault. Years of conditioning that disagreement meant she'd done something wrong. They worked on those patterns. Gently. On the nights when he went quiet, she'd give him space but come back later. I'm still here when you're ready to talk, she'd say. When she started apologizing for having opinions, he'd stop her. You're allowed to disagree with me. It doesn't make you wrong or bad. It just makes you different from me, and that's okay. 7 months in, something unexpected happened. Her younger brother reached out. He was the one person in her family who'd stayed neutral, not supporting them but not condemning them either. He asked to meet for lunch. She was nervous, expecting another disappointed speech. But instead he said something that surprised her. I think what you did took courage, he told her over sandwiches neither of them was really eating. Everyone acts like you did something terrible. But you left a guy who was controlling you. You chose someone who treats you well. Yeah, it's complicated because of the family thing. But you chose yourself. That's not something to be ashamed of. She cried right there in the restaurant. Her brother hugged her, and for the first time in months she felt like maybe she hadn't lost her entire family. Maybe there was still hope. Around the 8-month mark, they heard through mutual friends that his ex had started dating someone new. Someone serious. It was weird information to receive, wrapped in significance neither of them could quite name. He felt relief more than anything. Relief that she was moving forward. Relief that maybe eventually the anger would fade to indifference. They didn't get everyone back. That's important to understand. This isn't a story where everything works out perfectly, and all relationships are restored. Her mother still kept her distance. Her sister still refused to speak to her. Some of his friends never came around, but they built a new community. People who knew their story and accepted it. Co-workers who became friends. His cousin who'd always been unconventional herself and respected their choice. Her brother's wife who became someone she could talk to about the family dynamics without judgment. They realized they didn't need everyone. They needed enough. Enough support, enough understanding, enough love to balance out the loss. At the 1-year mark, on a random Tuesday afternoon, he proposed. No grand gesture, no elaborate plan. They were painting her apartment together, both covered in paint splatters, arguing about whether the wall color was sage green or seafoam when he just stopped and looked at her. Marry me, he said. She thought he was joking at first. What? Marry me, he repeated, more certain this time. I don't have a ring. I didn't plan this. But I don't want to wait for the perfect moment because this is it. This is perfect. You, covered in paint, arguing with me about colors that look exactly the same. This is what I want. Every day, forever. She started laughing and crying at the same time.
You're proposing to me in paint-covered sweatpants.
Is that a yes? He asked. Yes, you idiot, yes. They didn't plan a big wedding. Didn't see the point when half the people they'd invite wouldn't come anyway. They got married at the courthouse 3 months later with her brother and his cousin as witnesses. Afterward, they went to their favorite diner and ate pancakes in their nice clothes while the waitress wondered why 2 people, dressed for a wedding, were sitting in a booth, built for 4. It wasn't what either of them had imagined their wedding would be. But it was theirs. Real and imperfect and exactly what they needed. Life settled into something resembling normal. They moved in together officially, combining their apartments into a slightly bigger space. They adopted a cat who hated everyone except them. They built routines and inside jokes and the kind of boring, everyday love that movies don't make because it's not dramatic enough. But that boring love, that's the kind that lasts. The story doesn't end with complete reconciliation. A year after the wedding, her sister still hadn't spoken to her. Her mother sent a birthday card, but nothing more. Some wounds don't heal, or they heal so slowly you can't see the progress. But her father surprised everyone by showing up at their apartment one Sunday morning. He didn't say much, just asked if he could come in. They had coffee together. Awkward, stilted conversation about nothing important. When he left, he hugged his daughter for the first time in 2 years. I don't understand your choice, he said. But you're still my daughter. I've missed you. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't approval. But it was a start. The last scene of their story is unremarkable in the best way. It's a morning like any morning. She's making coffee in their kitchen, humming that off-key song she loves. He's at his desk talking to himself about work, oblivious that he's doing it. The cat is asleep in a patch of sunlight. She brings him a cup of coffee, kisses his forehead, and goes back to her own work. He reaches for her hand briefly, squeezes it, lets go. No words, no grand declarations. Just 2 people who chose each other despite everything, now choosing each other in the small, quiet ways that build a life. She came into his room quietly that rainy night, looking for shelter from a storm. She left his mind loud with possibility, with questions, with feelings he couldn't ignore. That noise eventually settled. It became the soundtrack of a life they built together, not perfect, not approved by everyone, but theirs. And some nights when he can't sleep and she's breathing softly beside him, he thinks back to that knock on his door. How close he came to not answering. How different everything would be if he'd just stayed on his couch and ignored whoever was outside. He never told her this, but he's grateful for the rain that night, for the storm that brought her to his door, for every difficult moment that followed, because those moments led here, to a quiet apartment, to morning coffee, to a love that survived everyone saying it shouldn't exist, to home.